In today's podcast,
So if I have this client who maybe has a focus and attention pattern, and they've been suffering with this for years, I know that pattern is ingrained in their brain. There's strong circuitry keeping that pattern there. So how do we fix that? How do we reverse that? And that's where neurofeedback comes in.
Hello, and welcome back to Real Brain Talk with Dr. Guy over there, Dr. Ken over here. Everybody, today's topic, we want to talk about neuroplasticity and the concept of neuroplasticity. It's a big word. It's actually, the concept hasn't been around that many decades. I know when we were in school, in graduate school, they really didn't think there was a lot that could be changed. And now we know that there's a whole bunch. Why don't you give a breakdown, Guy, of what neuroplasticity is?
Yeah, so you're right, Ken. Well, like I can remember in the 1990s, that's when I was in grad school. And I remember distinctly in my central nervous system class, them talking about in teaching and even in the textbooks, the fact that you can't change the neurons. You're born with a certain number of neurons and that's it. And you lose those neurons, like drinking, for instance, will kill
Right.
neurons for sure.
Right. You can only lose them. You can't
You
get
lose them, you can't get them back. And we believed that for the longest time. And it wasn't until the late 1990s that you started hearing people start, a lot of these researchers start to talk about this concept of neuroplasticity, which is basically the brain's ability to change and adapt based upon the input that goes into it.
Yeah, and learn. Like, what's crazy to be in school and being told you can't learn.
Right, because that's what neuroplasticity is. It's learning. So basically, the way it works is that if you use a certain neurological pathway over and over and over again, that pathway becomes more efficient, right? It just makes sense, right? So the way I always talk about it is I always say, picture you're driving down a road and it's kind of the middle of the night. There's not a lot of traffic there. And think of the traffic as the electrical signals. And you're driving down the road, and you get to a toll booth. There's only one toll open in the toll booth. There's a string of toll booths, there's only one toll open. And so you pass through relative ease. But imagine in the morning when rush hour hits and all those traffic hits that one toll booth, right? That's like all those electrical signals getting to that one place. And unless you open up new toll booths to get across, is there going to be a backup? So what your nervous system does is it basically opens new toll booths to allow more electrical signals to pass.
Create new pathways.
Create new pathways and make those pathways stronger. So what does it take to create neuroplasticity in your brain? Well, it takes, basically something done repetitively over and over and over again, consistently, and with a high frequency. So, if you just do it once a month, probably not going to make much change. But if you do it every day, those pathways, those neurological pathways become stronger. So the question comes, and this is something I wanted to ask you, is that good or bad? Is it good to be able to do that, or is it bad?
I think it's both. I definitely think there is a dark side to neuroplasticity, but on the bright side, right? We have to learn new things. And my mom's 88 years old right now, and she's learning Korean.
It's awesome.
So it's like, this is all of a sudden she's like, I'm going to learn Korean, right? If she didn't have the ability to do that, what's the point? She loves to learn stuff, and she's 88.
Right.
So, at any age, we should be able to learn new things, practice new things, right? If you want to pick up a guitar and learn how to play it, or if you want to learn a new language, you have to have neuroplasticity. It's a necessity.
And that's the good side of neuroplasticity.
Right.
The bad side is
the dark side. The dark side is never before in the history of our civilization have we had access to information that keeps bombarding us. I know you've had this experience. I think everybody listening has probably had the experience of mentioning something and then seeing that come up on their stream, whatever social media they're on, all of a sudden it's being sold to them. And it's not just with sales and goods, even, look at politics right now. Yeah. Politics is insane. And you see on social media, when you watch stuff, you see such polarizing views, and you have to have some cognitive flexibility to step back a little bit and see what's happening, right? The belief system is being repeated back to you. The algorithm is saying, all right, this is what you believe. This is going to get your attention. So I'm going to keep feeding this message back to you over. It's done so like subliminally, because you just think this is the news, right? This is the sky is blue. So I'm just going to, I'm going to accept it. And this is reality. And we're never before have we seen such a dichotomy of realities that we see right now.
It's true. And kind of bringing it back to neuroplasticity, if you keep using specific neurological pathways, even if they're bad pathways, those bad pathways become reinforced. And we see it with people that have habits, right? So what's a good habit that I can talk about? I know we talk about drug addiction, but what about something as simple as like eating chocolate? Like now chocolate has a number of other things with it as well, but you keep reinforcing that over and over and over again, and it becomes a stronger and stronger addiction. With neuroplasticity, if you keep doing something that's bad for you over and over and over again, it gets physically ingrained in your brain. And to talk about this is a really interesting study that was done in London. And what they did was they measured the size of the hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus is a area of the brain. It's responsible for a lot of things. It's responsible for memory, but it's also responsible for your ability to navigate. And so they measured the size of the hippocampus in taxi drivers and in bus drivers. And they looked at the size of them, and what they found was that taxi drivers had a hippocampus that was much bigger than bus drivers. And they surmised that the reason for that is because
Different paths.
taxi drivers are always navigating. So they're
Right.
using that pathway over and over again. So naturally, the size of that area of the brain is going to grow because it's growing new pathways. Whereas a bus driver doesn't navigate at all. They just follow a specific route. And that person's hippocampus isn't used as much as the taxi drivers. And that was a great study showing
I never
how
heard that study. That's awesome.
where neuroplasticity can actually change the physical nature of your brain. It's not just an electrical signal, it's actually a physiological change that occurs. And there's been many studies like that, Ken. There's another one where they showed how people with that were able to speak multiple languages had a larger anterior cingulate, which is another part of the brain, than people who didn't. And the same thing with musicians. There's areas of the brain that are bigger in musicians than in non-musicians. So the concept of neuroplasticity has been proven over and over and over again. And you can change it. You just have to remember, what does it take? It takes consistent, repetitive, high frequency, and you can make those changes in your own brain.
Right. And for good or for ill. So on the dark side, I really think it's important to have awareness. And I know everybody talks about awareness like it's this kind of, mythical thing that you can just have, but you can actually cultivate that by getting into a deep meditative state, doing alpha theta neurofeedback. You can start to focus on what your subconscious is kind of repeating back to you, and let
Exactly.
that bubble up, get awareness of what that story is in your background, and start to dissipate that story. And once you do that, then you can kind of see the manipulation that's going on around you.
Right.
Right. And then you
Right.
can kind of like, it's not affecting you. And, like you were saying before with the chocolate, or even just anger over politics, it does release endorphins. It gets it releases a chemical reaction that people are starting to crave.
Hmm.
And you don't want to be a slave.
Dopamine.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
dopamine. You don't want to
Dopamine.
be a slave to that. You want to be able to say, all right, this is not who I am. And you want to be able to have a reasonable conversation. You and I, we're on different sides of the political spectrum, but we actually agree more than we
We
disagree,
do. Yeah, we do.
because we're open to listening to the story. But I mean, I see things now, especially what's going on right now. People cannot communicate. They can't. It's anger and hatred and anger and hatred. And I don't want to be too, out there with it, but I think it's a planned thing. Like, I think it really, I think it sells attention. And I think in today's media, having eyes on attention it's a commodity.
It's all about shock, right? It's about clickbait and shock, and
Right. And it gets
you're
your eye on it, and there's
right.
advertising, and there's sales, and there's
Yeah.
things that get you focused, and it
Yeah.
and it creates this, hey, us against them, and you're with us, and it's just, we I mean, again, with politics, but we got to get
We can
back to being a one people.
Yeah.
It there's
Talking to each other. That's
yes.
what it is. It's all
Yes,
about talking to each
let's
other
start with what we agree upon,
and then
and
build
let's
from
build
there.
from there, right?
All right. Good tangent. Good tangent we just went on.
Let's
Let's
back
reel
back
it
to it.
into neurofeedback. So, neurofeedback, let's talk about neuroplasticity with regards to neurofeedback. So, we talk about people presenting to a neurofeedback practice. When we do a QEEG brain map, we find certain patterns, right, that are specific to conditions, right? So we know that there's a pattern for focus and attention. We know there's a pattern for anxiety and what have you. But if a person has been in that pattern for a long period of time, they've created neuroplastic changes in their brain that keep them in that pathway.
Right.
And that to me,
It's a shape that needs to be
yeah,
changed.
and that to me is the dark side of neurofeedback, or not neurofeedback. That to me is the dark
Side
side
of neuroplasticity.
of neuroplasticity, because it could work both ways. So if I have this client who maybe has a focus and attention pattern, and they've been suffering with this for years, I know that pattern is ingrained in their brain. There's strong circuitry keeping that pattern there. So how do we fix that? How do we reverse that? And that's where neurofeedback comes in. And I often laugh when people say, well, how many treatments? I need 1 or 2, 3 treatments. And I'm like, you've had this for 10 years. We have to reverse all the stuff that's gone on in your brain already. And that's not going to take 1 or 2 sessions.
And remember, it's not even a treatment. It's a
Right.
learning. You have to
You
learn
have to learn
how
how
to
to do it.
shift these patterns to a
Right.
healthier pattern.
Exactly. So we put the sensors on, we put a protocol in there that reverses the pattern, and the person sits there and watches a screen that gets dark and bright, and they learn, their brain learns
Right.
new patterns
In real time.
And now those new patterns can overtake the old patterns. So now after they've done 30, 40, 50 sessions of neurofeedback, they can go out in the world and they can rely on this new circuitry that they've created in their brain to pay attention, to not be hyperactive, to be able to focus, and that's how neurofeedback works.
And to learn to be more
Neuroplasticity is the
flexible.
basis, right? To be more flexible. It's the basis for neurofeedback, neuroplasticity. So we got to look at it from both the good and the bad. The good is neurofeedback can help reverse the bad patterns. That's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah. And it makes sense because, like you were saying, back in the 90s, neuroplasticity, barely a concept, right? And neurofeedback really was discovered back in the 60s, but it didn't really start to hit, until the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's still really in its infancy as, as a modality because right, technology's gotten so much easier. It used to be these big university studies that were with these big mainframe computers and all in one location, and now with technology being what it is, I mean, you can do neurofeedback in an office. You can actually even do it at home.
Mhm.
With our program, you can actually set the protocols, teach them how to do it, and have them actually do it at home on their own. And you can get all the results, monitor everything they're doing, and actually guide them through the process remotely,
And
which is
think
incredible.
about remember what we said, what does it take for neuroplasticity to occur? It takes the constant stimulation of neurons, repetition, and frequency. So if someone's doing their training from home, they could do it twice a day if they want, right? That's higher frequency than coming to the office twice or 3 times a week. So they're going to get a neuroplastic change that may occur quicker with the home training. But home training should never be done without being under the clinical supervision of someone, because
No,
you
right?
can you
If
can
you have a
home
bad teacher,
train,
you're going to learn a bad lesson.
right? You can home train and you could feed the dark side of neuroplasticity. So you got to be very, very careful. You got to make sure you're with someone that's qualified, that's been trained, in how to do neurofeedback the proper way. Neuroplasticity has been a concept that has just fascinated me from the minute I heard about it. First time I heard about it, I was in a seminar with Dr. Dan Murphy, and he talked about neuroplasticity. And I remember everyone in the room just looking around going, this guy's nuts. This isn't what we learned. We didn't learn this.
You
And
can't
then he
learn new
popped up,
things.
and then he put up all this research, and we are like, my gosh, I can't believe it.
Right.
Amazing.
And now what? 30 years later, it's pretty much common, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is right.
right.
Everything is neuroplasticity these days,
Yeah. I remember going home and doing a Google search on neuroplasticity. I think I got like 7 hits. Try doing a Google search now on neuroplasticity, and
right?
you're going to get millions of hits.
Right.
So it's a field that's just fascinating. It has incredible implications for anybody doing anything with the brain, but especially for neurofeedback. And understanding it is the only way that you could take advantage of it. And you
Right.
have to.
And think about what can affect the human experience more globally than the brain, the central nervous system.
Yeah. What's the slogan everyone uses? We're going to change the brain. We're going to change the world one brain at
One
a
at a time.
time. And that's so true though.
It is.
And think about all the programs that are being used now in jails and prisons. What are they trying to do? The neurofeedback programs that you see in these jails and prisons, they're trying to reverse bad neuroplasticity in the brain. They're trying to create new neuroplasticity in these hardened criminals so that when they come out of jail, they're rehabilitated and can become part of society again, you
Right. Well,
know?
think about it, right? I mean, if you've been under toxic stress since childhood, right? And I think we're going to do another whole podcast on toxic stress, but if you're in toxic stress, what's going to happen? Your behavior is going to be off. You're going to be angry. You're going to do things that maybe society isn't very happy with because just can't express yourself in a way that's healthy and safe for you or for the environment or for the people around you. So, the prisons are full of people who are just, and then not to mention once you get into prison, because I can only imagine the
Yeah, that's
stressful
another.
environment that is. But everything that got you in there is troubling and difficult.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. But the good news is that there is something that can help with that. And, as long as neurofeedback has grown tremendously, right? Think about when we first started, there was almost no one doing it. And now clinics are filled with neurofeedback.
Yeah, or any kind of brain training
Yeah,
exercises. And I do caution people with, like you said earlier, brain training without true guidance and without real specificity can lead to problems. But but everybody's trying to improve the brain, improve the brain, improve the brain.
yeah, yeah.
And that's
Well,
what we're here for.
one thing I know for sure is that brain core providers are trained properly. And the
You bet
way
they
I
are.
know that is because me and you train them.
Right.
So if you're looking for neurofeedback, brain core is the place to go without a
There it
doubt.
is. And on that note, I think we'll finish off today.
All right.
So, all right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see
All
you
right,
on
thank
the
you.
next one.
Take care.